Okay. Got my Fortinet background and everything. It's going to be funny because this is not a Fortinet sanctioned event, but I'll get more into that in a second. Okay, so let me just make sure I got everything lined up the way I need it. Looks good to me. If someone doesn't mind, can y'all put in the chat whether or not y'all can see my screen, or give me a audible cue to let me know that my screen is visible. And I am going to look at the chat and see. Oh, okay, the chat is saying yes, it's views. All right, awesome. Okay, so let's get right into it. First off, I want to say thank each and every one of y'all for joining. Again, as you come in, please place yourself on mute. If you want to unmute, that's all good, but just want to make sure I can get through this relatively quickly. I myself, my name's Jonathan. I am known as Afroman Says on Reddit, also known as historiantech in my own blog. And lastly, to my friends, I'm known as JT. So unless you're a bully from elementary school, feel free to call me JT. At any rate, I'm a Fortinet employee, sales engineer, currently out of North Carolina. I do hold the NSE 8 credential, and I've been a mod of our Fortinet for a minute. So I don't know how long y'all been a part of the community. If you're part of the Reddit community, I encourage you to join if you're not. But long story short, I play with a lot of Fortinet stuff. The most important thing I guess I can say today is that this is not a Fortinet sanctioned event. So, if you get some information and it doesn't work out as well as you thought, please don't go and call my boss and get me fired, okay? But all that being said, even though this is a Fortinet sanctioned event, quite commonly Fortinet employees are out on the social media sites and just the medium in general, trying to share as much knowledge as we can about the platform. It's something we love. That's our sales organization, our technical support organization, our professional services organization, and many parts of our other organization. We like to be as open book as possible because we feel like the more that people understand the product and see the value of it, the more adoption it's going to bring. So hopefully this is going to result in some of that. All that being said, shout out to my homie, OT Matt, who's a guy that I like to call out in particular because I know how much he does and how the tireless hours that he works to make sure that people on social media get a response. So tip of the cap to you, sir. Keep fighting the good fight. But not only OT Matt, but all my other Fortinet colleagues who are under their various pseudonyms. I appreciate everything that y'all are doing. We're doing a great job getting the word out. Now, all that being said, enough about Fortinet. I want to give a big shout out to my man, James G on Reddit. Hopefully you're on here because if you're not, this is like all for naught. But all of this started because my man had enough confidence to say, I don't know, right? He had enough confidence to say, hey, I got this thing coming out in front of me and I need some help. And, I think that takes a lot of boldness, especially on social media today when, a lot of people will try to rake you over the coals for saying, I don't know, or I need help. So shout out to you, man. Hopefully this is useful and, please feel free to keep asking those questions and I'm going to try to answer them as much as I can, as well as my colleagues. Another thing to point out is that to everyone else, right? If you have questions and things like that, like I know Fortinet, you got technical support, you got your sales and account teams, you got, professional services organizations, but please reach out to these forums. I think the moderators of our Fortinet have worked very hard and tirelessly to make sure that it's a welcome environment, right? Like, there's no stupid questions. I mean, I say that in quotation marks. I mean, there are some pretty dumb questions, but no one knows everything, right? And everyone starts from somewhere. So we try to keep that in mind when people ask very elementary, I guess you can call it that way, questions. So feel free, come to the Discord channel, which is also as part of our Fortinet. You can see how to get out there. Use your resources, some of Fortinet's resources, the Fuse, Connect and all that stuff. Use them. There's people out here who, love and are very passionate about this product and are just happy to share information. So that being said, today I'm going to focus specifically on an ask from James G. So one of the things, James G, it's me. One of the things he mentioned when in his Reddit post was, you know, I got some questions about this route tag feature in the SD-WAN. He did also say he wanted to have, you know, some more information about BGP in general. Unfortunately, James, I don't have enough time to go through everything from SD-WAN and BGP, but what I'm going to try to do is cover a lot of the basics. I'm going to give a brief overview, if you will, to just kind of get you, you know, whet your appetite, and then maybe a little bit later we can set up another deeper dive to break down SD-WAN. Quick plug about the SD-WAN. So I wrote one of the first guides for SD-WAN for Fortinet back when it was, you know, strongly being developed in its early heyday. I'm not sure where that guide has turned into, but I am in the process of trying to work on guide version 2.0. So hopefully in the next year or so, you'll see that. Hopefully by sooner than a year, but you know, at this rate, it's probably going to take that. That being said, I'll try to cover as much detail as possible, and then, you know, I'm going to really focus on this route tag, and then at the end, if we have more time, I will try to, you know, focus on the general stuff. So the ground rules: you don't need to be on camera. If you do want to be on camera, cool. I'm going to be on camera, but if you don't, I understand. You know, lunchtime, or it might be evening, or early in the morning, not sure. So it's all good. If you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to try my best to watch out for the blinking light. If I see it, I'll try to answer it right as it comes up. If I don't see it and it's still there, I will answer it at the end. So I'm going to try not to let people off of mute, just because I got a feeling that this thing's going to go down to the wire, but we'll see. Also, guys, this is the first time I've done this, so please expect some hang-ups and hiccups, if you will. This is very off the cut, something that's very not formal. It's going to be supposedly just more of a talk rather than a presentation in a demo. So without that being said, let's get to it. All right, so right now you can see my screen, and what you should see as the first thing on the screen is a network topology, right? So what I want to do is just kind of, you know, level set with everybody to give everyone a glimpse of the environment that I'm going to be demonstrating and working out of. So you can see all the way here to the left, I have a branch 01 FortiGate. This is actually a physical 101F that's in my 24U lab right over there. Then you also see this HQ01. This is a virtual machine FortiGate running FortiOS 7.0. Don't do it in production, but in a lab environment, all good. And then lastly, I have Data Center 01, which is also running as a VM, running FortiOS 646. And that's going to serve as the hub of my hub spoke model SD-WAN deployment. So branch 01, HQ01, those are my spokes. Data Center 01, that's my hub, okay? Now you can see here, you know, you can kind of ignore this 81F at the end. That's just my home gateway for the gate. But the real meat and potatoes come down to these routers that I have in this kind of intermediate layer between my FortiGates and my actual 81F. This is serving as my, hopefully you can see my cursor. This is serving as my internet layer, if you will. So it's not very complicated, right? Like, I just have each of the FortiGates on their own networks. These guys are running eBGP between them. Hence, you can see the different AS numbers. So they're exchanging routes all happily. And the FortiGates can, you know, basically get to their internet addresses through these routers. So it's not a very complicated lab environment, but it will, you know, kind of simulate most use cases for what you're going to see when you're actually deploying out in the internet. I said that with an S. Now, that being said, one thing that you don't see on the lab environment, and I know I keep looking at the camera, and then I got a dual monitor set up here, but what you don't see is that I do have a virtual machine called Winbridge, and what it does is it allows me to set up a transparent bridge between my FortiGate and my router so that I can do network congestion and increase latency and introduce packet loss to the link. So if I got enough time at the end, I'm going to do a demo of SD-WAN using the route tag feature so y'all can see that it works. And I'm going to be using that tool, which y'all will see how I configure and stuff like that. So that is my lab. Like I said, if you got any questions, let me just check to see if there's any questions. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, got questions, cool. Recording, yes, I'm going to post a recording on Reddit and maybe my blog in Discord. Once it's all done, it's being recorded via the Zoom cloud, so I should just be able to send a link. That should be good. Reason to do eBGP as an IGP. So I'm not using eBGP as an IGP. I'm actually using iBGP as an IGP, and that's going to happen between my FortiGates. The eBGP portion is actually serving as an exterior gateway protocol, and that's why I'm using eBGP on the internets, because 9 times out of 10, if you're going to simulate an internet connection, the routers that are on the internet, they're using eBGP to talk. So that's what I'm using there. But great questions. Please keep filling them in the chat as they come in. Now, let's talk about SD-WAN in general. So before I actually start talking about route tags and going into the details about that, I'm gonna take a step back and just give you a brief synopsis of SD-WAN, right? So SD-WAN is essentially a way to introduce intelligent routing into your network. So, you know, back in the day, and this ain't really not too far gone, but back in the day, if you wanted to have, you know, low latency, high quality of service links, you had to go with an MPLS or some kind of dedicated circuit, right? So, you know, MPLS is expensive, it costs a ton of money. It's sometimes hard to reach or hard to get in a lot of different places. There's a lot of downfalls to getting it, and you don't get a lot of bandwidth typically for the amount of money you pay. However, there's typically an abundance of commodity circuits. Now, commodity internet going to be things like your Spectrums, your AT&Ts, your Verizons, your CenturyLink. I'm not endorsing any of these, by the way, but I'm just saying these are the common ones that are out there. Comcast, et cetera, et cetera. These are US based. If you're in other countries, I'm sure y'all have your own local providers. While, you know, if you're in a rural setting, they might be harder to come by. In most kind of like metropolitan city areas, they're, you know, relatively prevalent across the board, right? So a lot of the times you can say, hey, I want to get internet access, and they can, you know, bring you online within a week. Whereas if you're trying to bring MPLS online, sometimes that can take months and maybe even years, depending on what the infrastructure is and demand. That being said, MPLS and those dedicated circuits provide a certain layer of benefit because they're dedicated links. You know how much bandwidth you're going to get. You have a typical SLA on the amount of latency that you're going to get. So if you have critical applications such as voice or video, you typically want to place that on those links because you know that's going to be a great user experience. Well, commodity internet, you know, while they don't necessarily guarantee things like latency and quality of service, they do provide a pretty good SLA around uptime, right? So, you know, 9 times out of 10, a commodity circuit could potentially meet your needs when it comes to some of your critical applications, voice, video. Maybe if you have some cloud provider applications and you want to make sure it takes a certain path, internet can typically provide a great way to access those items. The problem is that, you know, again, they don't necessarily have the same level of SLAs associated with a MPLS circuit. So if somebody runs a backhoe through a fiber and cuts your, you know, commodity internet, you might be down for a few days. So to combat that, you know, a lot of the vendors, you know, kind of got smart and said, hey, well, what if we took multiple commodity internet circuits and basically bonded them into a virtualized, you know, WAN circuit, and we put some intelligence on the platform so that, you know, it can pick and choose the best circuit based on some, you know, network criteria, and hence SD-WAN was born. So that is a quick summary about SD-WAN. As far as setting it up on the FortiGate, I guess the thing or the main difference between, you know, FortiGate SD-WAN deployment versus some of your other, you know, big names or well-known players, is that, Fortinet SD-WAN is not controller based. And what I mean by that is that when you look at some of the other pure play SD-WAN providers, they have like a cloud management infrastructure. And essentially that cloud management infrastructure is controlling the different endpoints and saying, okay, when this set of link characteristics or criteria is met, you start using these links. Fortinet's a little different, as in the decisions are actually made by the initiating side, right? So there's no cloud controller that's going down to the FortiGate to tell it, hey, you need to switch over this link. FortiGate can be pretty autonomous in that sense. So, if it does lose, connectivity to the management via, FortiManager or any of the FortiGate cloud management utilities, you can still go to the local UI of the FortiGate, make changes, and it can still perform its SD-WAN based on the local policy that's set. That being said, that does sometimes pose challenges in the scenario that, you have a hub and spoke model. 9 times out of 10, traffic's going to be initiated from the spoke going up to the hub. So SD-WAN works fine. When you want to initiate traffic from the hub going back to the spoke, this might mean like if you're trying to monitor some applications or something like that behind the spoke, you're typically going to run into some challenges. But Fortinet does have, I consider them workarounds to get around that. You can either, do SD-WAN from the hub going back to the spokes, or you can use some features within the spoke to basically change the routes that are preferable on the hub side via BGP. That's out of scope for what I'm talking about today, but just know that those capabilities are there. That being said, when you are getting ready to set up BGP on a Fortinet device, there's 3 main things that you got to worry about. Number 1 is plumbing. Number 2 is routing. And number 3 is policies. So I'm not going to go through and actually set up everything from scratch, but I'm going to show you the different components of what I'm talking about. So the first component, which is the plumbing, which is basically the network connectivity between your sites that are going to be working, over SD-WAN. So let me check before I go into this, see if I got any new questions. All right, awesome. So plumbing. So with SD-WAN, right, like I was going back and describing the purpose of SD-WAN. If you got one interface, there's not really a lot of benefit that SD-WAN is going to give you. Now, there is some benefit, right? If you turn on SD-WAN on the FortiGate and you only got one interface, at least you have the ability to monitor and see the amount of your network characteristics of the WAN device that the WAN circuit the FortiGate is using, right? But in most cases, when you deploy SD-WAN, you need 2 or more WAN or interfaces to be able to do intelligent routing over. So in this scenario, I have 2 different VPNs terminating to my hub FortiGate. Now, if I go back and look at my hub FortiGate, which is this data center 01, you will see I have 2 VPNs that are in dial-up mode that will answer those VPN connectivities from each of my spokes. So again, I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm just going to give you the high level. Once you do have that plumbing set up, so you got your internet connectivity, so you can route between the 2 FortiGates, then you got your VPN so that you can establish an overlay network, based on those internet connectivity or that internet network. The last portion of it is to set up, well, I'm not going to talk about 80 VPN. I'm going to skip 80 VPN for now. Just know you got to have 2 VPN interfaces, okay? Once you get the VPN interfaces established, the next thing you got to cover is the routing portion. So this is going to be where your BGP comes in. Now, in this scenario, in FortiOS 6.4.6, most of this has to be done from the GUI. From the CLI. So a lot of people are going to be like, boo, I'm not trying to hear that. Like, when are we going to bring it into the GUI? Well, by no means is this an endorsement. So like I said, if you're in a lab environment, cool. If you're in production, don't do this. A lot of this functionality has been brought into the GUI in FortiOS 7.0. So Shout out to my man, Jordan Thompson from the Fortinet developing team. I know that you were listening to folks on Reddit and you heard them loud and clear and you took their advice and recommendations and put it in the product. So thank you so much for doing that. But since we're not on FortiOS 7, I'm just going to show you that, everything from the FortiGate side on the spoke side is handled through the CLI, and it's a baseline BGP configuration. When I say baseline, baseline if you know what you're doing with SD-WAN. Otherwise, some of these things you have to wait for the guide to come out. The last thing you want to do once you have your plumbing in place and your routing in place is set up the policies. So the first part of setting up the policies is one, defining your Sdwin zones. So this is something that was new, I think introduced with FortiOS either 6.4.1 or 6.4.2. But essentially what you have to do is take your interfaces that are going to be participating in SD-WAN, create an SD-WAN zone and throw them in here. So in this case, you can see I have two different zones. I have SD Internet, which takes my underlay, my physical interfaces that allow me to connect to the internet. And then I have my SD VPN, which is my overlay, which allows me to connect over my underlay to get to my data center to access those resources. From there, you got to build the policy to actually set up performance SLAs, service level agreements, so that the FortiGate can monitor over the correlating or corresponding underlay and the corresponding overlay to see how that network is performing. So in this scenario, I actually built my SLAs to go over my VPN connections, and I'm actually hitting a loopback interface right here, 1071.223.1 from my spokes. So the reason why I chose loopback was because one, it doesn't go down, which is very important. And two, it's something that is separate from the other networks. So, a lot of times you want to make sure that the traffic can get to the hub. And then from that point, it's up on the hub to decide the best path to get it to wherever it needs to go. So there are some other scenarios where you don't necessarily want to choose the loopback, but 99% of the time, I think you want to choose loopback. The last part is setting up the Sd-Wan rules, which I will start to delve in a little bit deeper when I start talking about the route tag feature. But just want to show that, that is the last part. And this actually tells the SD-WAN how to make intelligent decisions based on some predefined criteria, whether that be latency, jitter, packet loss, bandwidth, or some other custom metric, if you will. And the last part, of course, FortiGate, next generation firewall, can't do anything without a firewall rule. You must make sure that you have the firewall rules in place. As you can see here, I have this allow data to data center from my Torian Code VLAN over SD-WAN. So when I get towards I call it the demonstration part at the end of SD-WAN, we'll see how that all comes together. So that is the basic setup of SD-WAN. Are there any questions about that? Man, that's a good question. All right, so Rowan, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm gonna get back to that question towards the tail end. So keep posting them in there as they come in there, and I will make sure to answer that question. All right, so let's get to what we're talking about today, route tag. So like you might ask, okay, when I go in and I create an SD-WAN rule today, Jonathan, like, the way I do it now is I go in and I say, all right, I'm gonna choose this source. So this might be the network that's behind the FortiGate, going to this destination, which is going to be the network on the other side of the SD-WAN. And, I hit okay and it just works. So why in the heck do I even need a route tag? Well, let me tell you why. So typically a route tag is, or typically in an SD-WAN deployment, right? I would say probably 9 times out of 10, you could probably get away with using static routes. Not 9 times out of 10, sorry. 4 times out of 10, you could probably get away with using static routes and having a very statically defined SD-WAN topology, right? So things may not, be changing dynamically, or, you may not be growing new sites. You know, it's very like if you have a very, you know, I'm a set it and forget it type network, then using static routes and, you know, network objects that are static, that's perfectly fine. I'd say in 73.2% of the time, you're going to have most people who have dynamic environments. So, you know, to do and to scale at the degree of what you would need to keep up with the dynamic environment, trying to manage all that static with static routes and going in and making changes at the Forti manager, I think is going to outweigh the benefit of installing or deploying SD-WAN. So to help automate and to, you know, essentially make the system scale itself, you can use things like BGP as your routing protocol and use things like route tags to dynamically learn new networks and perform some level of SD-WAN functionality against them without having to go in and manually make a change into policy. So for example, let's say for instance, you have, you know, 10 networks at your hub today, and these 10 networks, you know, let's say 2 of them are critical and the other 8 are just your normal, you know, I just want to load balance, you know, choose the maximum bandwidth setting for accessing those networks over SD-WAN. Well, let's say you add a new critical network, right? Say for instance, you know, you got your VoIP, you got your video cameras, and now you have some other new network that requires, you know, ultra low latency or best path selection. Well, if you don't have route tags, what you would have to do today is essentially go into the FortiNet, or sorry, the FortiGate hub, introduce that network into BGP, or, you know, if you're using a static route, you would have to statically assign that, but introduce that network into BGP, then you have to actually go in and touch your rule to add that network in there, right? Now, again, if you're, you know, only making a change once a year, you're probably not going to get a benefit from that. But I've seen in some cases where customers have very dynamic networks, you know, networks are spinning up, networks are spinning down. Sometimes the FortiGate is learning those new networks from other upstream routers. So its routing table is going to constantly be changing. So what the FortiGate can do is say, okay, well, rather than, you know, you having to add that network, I'm going to tag it with a particular community string. So community strings is a standard in BGP that basically allows you to apply a label to a route that's being learned in BGP. So I can tag that label to a route going to my downstream spokes, and I can tell my spokes, hey, whenever you see this community string, perform or apply this route tag to it, and this route tag can correlate to a specific rule within SD-WAN policy. So, you know, that's probably the main use case. Another use case for that is, you know, let's say for instance, you have like non-contiguous networks at your hub. You know, maybe you got a 10 network here, a 172 network here. A lot of times people say, well, I can just create, you know, an address object that is contiguous that will encompass all of the networks that I want to encompass. And that's very well possible and fine. But if you have, you know, non-contiguous networks with ranging subnet mask, you know, maybe you have a 23 here, or 27 there, or 29 here, you know, some of that can start to become unwieldy to manage via network objects. So instead, what you can do is tag them via BGP, and then based on that tag, again, create an SD-WAN rule that can perform whatever predetermined SD-WAN strategy for handling that traffic, okay? So any questions about that before I keep going? Nope. All right, awesome. Let's keep it moving. So let's talk about the configuration of this. So majority of the configuration for this, my hub closed. So let me bring my hub back up. So the majority of configuration for this is going to happen at the spoke side, but there is some configuration you have to do from the hub side. So the first thing I want to show is at the hub, you can see that I have a route map that's basically tagging certain routes that the hub is sending down to the spokes. So if I go in and look at this actual route map, you'll see that I have a rule that basically says, you know, any route, because I didn't specify criteria for match. So basically any route that this hub is sending out to the spokes, tag it with this community string of 64550:2000. Now, I'm not going to give you a dissertation about community strings, but in a nutshell, it's a 32-bit number, which is commonly seen as two 16-bit numbers separated with a colon in between. And from what I read, generally speaking, the first 16-bit number is typically the AS that is representative of the router that is actually sending the stuff out. And the second 16-bit number is a label. So that's a kind of a user-defined label. In this scenario, I just chose 2000 arbitrarily. You can choose anything that's a 16-bit number, which 2 to the 16, I can't do the math right now, but it's a large number. That being said, once you have the route map defined, you simply just apply it to the BGP neighbor. So in this scenario, since it's at the hub, I'm applying it to my spokes. So I'm using a dynamic BGP neighbor group, so I don't have to define each of the neighbors individually. You can apply it to them, and that is essentially all you have to do. And if you want to confirm it, not summary, it's neighbor, you can see here that this community attribute is being sent from my hub down to my neighbors, spokes. Alternatively, I think there's also the get router info BGP community info. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is actually right, but this is the correct label or community string that I'm sending out. So that's pretty much all you have to do from the hub side. Now, note, once you make that change, those may not actually reflect in the spoke until you actually clear the BGP peer. So for whatever reason, even though I have soft reconfiguration inbound enabled on both sides, I wasn't able to get that community string to start showing up on my spoke side until I actually cleared the BGP, but I'll show you that in a second. All right, that being said, that's pretty much it from the hub side, very straightforward. Now from the branch side, what you'll see if I go to my show route BGP is that I do have a route map in, which is telling my branch side that any of the routes learned from this peer, which is my hub, perform this route map to do whatever criteria I specify, right? So if I go and look at this show router route map and then do the RM tag in, you'll see that I have a route map specifically tailored to matching the inbound communities, right? So if you got multiple inbound communities, you can set multiple rules to match based on that. By the way, on the hub side, if you had multiple communities you want to send out, you'll just create multiple rules. So, and then you have to match the prefix, right? Because you got to tie a prefix to a rule. But that being said, this inbound communities, I'm going to show you the contents of that community list. And you can see here, all it's doing is it has a rule to match anything that has the community string 64550:2000, which is coming from my hub FortiGate. So the big kicker in this is that in the route map itself, when you match that particular community, you want to set the route tag attribute, because that is what tells the spoke side or the client side FortiGate, hey, these networks are associated with these route tags. So when you reference a route tag in the Sd-Wan rule, it's going to know to match it to these networks. This is not to be confused, because I was setting this up yesterday. I was like, why isn't this working? This is not to be confused with the attribute set tag. This is something completely different. And if you set this, you're going to be in for a bad time. Okay. I mean, sorry, if you set this with the intent to use it as a route tag with the Sd-Wan, you're going to be in for a bad time. Otherwise, it probably works as fine for whatever intent it is. But please make sure you use the set route tag. Again, this is well documented and defined in the Fortinet handbook. So if you just follow the instructions there, you'll be well on your way. But just want to call that out because your boy got lost for a little bit. That being said, once you have those route tags defined, and by the way, when I was talking about clearing the BGP, what I did was I did this clear IP, and then you could go in and specify the neighbor. So that way, if you have other neighbors defined on your spoke and you don't want to impact them, but you do want to clear the BGP sessions that are going to your upstream hub, you can pop in the IP address of the hub and it'll actually clear those and leave the other ones intact. So that's kind of a pro tip for you. But that being said, once those are all properly done, you can see here my BGP summary is established, and then I can go get router info, BGP community, and bam, now I see all of the routes that have a community associated with it. Now, what's not useful of this is that if I had multiple communities, I couldn't see which of these routes belong to the community. So instead, what you got to do is use this community info. And what this will tell you is all of the different communities that the FortiGate has learned. So now I can go and take that, go back into community, paste that in there. And now it will show me all the routes associated with this community. So if I did have a different community, like maybe 64550:1000, I could pop those in and it would show me just the routes associated with the different communities. So again, a pro tip, something I ran into while trying to get ready for this. But all in all, it works just fine. Now, once you have your communities coming in to your FortiGate and the routes are being properly tagged, well, let me take a step back. So one thing I want you to notice too, because I have that route tag, now this route tag here is populated to show you that not only did I get the communities in, but I've actually applied the proper route tag to those routes. So that's another useful tidbit of this BGP community command, is that it will show you a route tag. When we get to the debug session very shortly, I'll talk about some other commands you can use. But for now, once you have that set up, you can go in and actually create your Sd-Wan rule, which allows you to reference the route tag rather than referencing a source and a destination address, right? So now this actually takes place of that, because it's saying, any of the routes that I am dynamically learning via BGP, I'm going to apply this particular SD-WAN strategy to it. Now, when you initially configure that, it has to be done through the CLI on the FortiGate. Unfortunately, it's not available as a selection criteria as part of the rules, as you can see when I'm creating a new rule. However, once it has been set through the CLI, you can see that it is now modifiable from the GUI. And, if I wanted to change it to, 1500 or maybe 2500 or whatever I want to set it to, I can set it to that. And then, of course, all the other criteria, if you want to say only apply this to a specific source, you can do that as well. Now, note that once you do set criteria for the destination, you cannot use it as an and to both the internet service and or the application. So, these are considered once you set it, that's the only criteria that you can use for matching. But 9 times out of 10, if you have, control over your networks and what your networks are correlating to, like for instance, if it's dealing with VoIP, you're typically going to have only a VoIP network where, phones and PBXs and all that stuff live. You can do the matching based on that network and then have that dynamically updated via this route tag. So once you have the route tag set, you choose your strategy. In this scenario, I'm going to choose best quality. But of course, if you're familiar with our SD-WAN solution, you can choose manual, which will allow you to manually assign your interfaces. Lowest cost, which will allow you to assign a cost to each interface to say, okay, I'm gonna use this one first, and only if it comes out of the SLA, start using the higher cost interface. And then of course, maximum bandwidth, which allows you to round robin your sessions across all of the interfaces or interfaces within a particular SD-WAN zone. So you can see here, I'm going back to best quality. I'm using VPN DC11, VPN DC22, and my measure SLA is going to be across my VPN tunnel to get to my loopback interface on my hub FortiGate. And lastly is the quality criteria. In this scenario, I'm going to use latency, but like I was saying earlier, you have a lot of different criteria you can use to decide which is the best path to take. So all that being said, as you can see, it's active, it's working. Right now, I have VPN DC 1-1 being selected as my best path. And if I look at the SLA, you're going to see that the latency is a tad bit higher on VPN DC 1.1. The reason, or 1-1, the reason why I'm selecting it is because in the best path criteria match, there's something called a link cost threshold that you can set. And why am I telling you when I can show you? The link cost threshold is something that you can set so that the interfaces aren't ping-ponging back and forth to each other. So what the FortiGate will do is it will look at the order of how you have the interfaces defined here. So I have VPN1 and VPN2, and then it'll say as long as the latency of VPN1 is not 50% more of the latency of VPN2, still use VPN1. So in this scenario, when I get to my test scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show y'all, well, if I got time, I will show you, how that all works. Like if I got my latency on both of them at 25%, and then I bump the latency on VPN1, it's still not going to change. But when I bump it up to 40, because, 25%, half of that is 12.5, 12.5 plus 25 is 37.5. 40 is over 37.5, it will actually fell over to VPN2. So sorry, I had to do some math.
You're like hilarious, dude.
A little bit.
You're too funny.
All right, hold on. Somebody went off on mute. Let me see if I can catch him so I can, bam, got you. All right, so all that being said, let's see some of the debugs, right? So again, it's all working. You can see that the route tags, in fact, it's choosing its latency as a criteria. If I look at what I can do to debug this, I got a few options. The first option is what I've shown you from BGP, right? Get router info BGP community will show you the route tags matching to specific networks. The second option is this route Sd-Wan diagnose sys Sd-Wan, and then you can look at this route tag list. So what this will do is actually show you that with route tag 2000, I have these addresses associated with it. Now, this breaks it out into the type of prefix. So I got some /24s here, and I got a /32 because I'm tagging basically every route I'm learning from the hub down to the spoke, okay? You also have this command route tag flush. So, if you want to manually kick off a flush and have it to clear this out and relearn everything that's there. But in my experience, it typically allows you to, what's the word I'm looking for? Typically, it allows you to update dynamically, right? So that typically works very well. Another command that you have is this Sd-Wan service. Bam. This will also tell you the route tag as well. It does not actually tell you the tag number that's matching, but it will tell you that these are the routes that are matching, right? So in a nutshell, those are the commands that you're going to use to kind of troubleshoot it to make sure that you did all the steps right and that you're following all the steps and everything's working. So if you run into problems, that's typically what you got to do to see if there's, if it's working properly. So as far as I know, there's not a lot of support for it in the GUI today, but just keep dropping your enhancement requests to your local account teams and or on Reddit, where our studious employees are constantly taking that information and feeding it back up. And hopefully we'll get some support added in that future. All right, that being said, I'm going to take a quick breather to see if I can go back and answer some questions. Then I'll do my SD-WAN demo, and then I'm going to wrap this up. So in your opinion, are there any major benefits into using SD-WAN in an active passive WAN setup in contrast to the pre-SD-WAN era where you configure a link monitor? Absolutely. I think the benefits that SD-WAN gives you, even if you're doing active passive WAN, is the ability to monitor your links. I know that the link monitor will also monitor for jitter, latency, and packet loss, but there was really no GUI graph design way to render that information. I'm not even sure if it recorded it in a log file. While SD-WAN allows you to get a visual representation of how your links are doing. Also, you can record it in a log file. So if you want to send it to a third-party server or your FortiAnalyzer, you can make charts and graphs and provide that to your ISP to say, hey, look, this is how great my service has been, or look how this is how crappy my service has been. Get on your job. In my experience so far, SD-WAN sometimes complicates the routing due to the hashing algorithm, or the self-originating traffic. So, I mean, yeah, there's going to be always some pros and cons to using SD-WAN. I do think the pros outweigh the cons, but typically there is a way to make it do what you want it to do. If you're running any particular problems or questions, please hit your local account team up, support, or hit these forums and see if somebody can help you out. Also in my geography, bandwidth, 100 megabits is a commodity, not a luxury. Indeed, we are spoiled over here in the US where, we have gig fiber links, kind of mainstay in some of our major metros. That being said, if you're trying to look at that level of bandwidth on an MPLS circuit, you're going to probably pay way more money than you would pay if you're using, commodity internet. When it comes to 5G, I know that a lot of wireless providers are starting to up their data caps because their networks just have more capacity to support those networks. So, I think the way the trajectory is going, bandwidth hopefully is going to start to become a little bit more prevalent. Another question, would you ever choose eBGP for hub and spoke SD-WAN? If you're just doing if you're just doing SD-WAN and you don't have a use case for ADVPN, I mean, there's no reason why you can't use eBGP, right? There might be a little bit more administrative overhead because you can't use the things like the dynamic BGP groups, because if you're using eBGP, each one of your spokes, they're going to have a separate AS number. And there's some workarounds about that. Like you can go into the actual neighbor within the FortiGate and say, set my AS to this, whatever. But all that being said, there's yes, you can use it for that. Would I recommend it? I think iBGP is the way to go, just from a maintenance management overhead. It allows you to pretty much do everything that you need to do. From the iBGP standpoint, you could also set up route reflector. So you have to do that when you're using ADVPN, so that routes from spoke A and routes from spoke B, spoke A can learn about the routes from spoke B through the hub, which is going to serve as the route reflector. I get the feeling that initially everything was iBGP in the documentation, but now in example deployments found, they use eBGP. So I'm not sure which documents you're referring to. Some of the old documentation, some that I've actually written, probably had eBGP because I didn't know any better at the time, which was a few years ago. Now that I am, kind of in line with how the best practices are, I particularly recommend iBGP the whole way. I don't even recommend using OSPF or RIP because those are supported in ADVPN as well. iBGP the whole way. Something that has been unanswered for me a long time. How do you configure rules from SLAs for a hub? Okay, that one we're going to have to take on a different call because that's going to go way beyond the, I guess, the scope of what I have. But, I have been playing around with that in my lab environment. And here you can see that I have, a spoke defined SLA within my hub. So essentially you have to create one of these for each of your spokes. You could put a loop back on each of your spokes, advertise those up to the hub, and then use that to go backwards. And then when you're using your SD-WAN rules, because SD-WAN is using routing, if you choose an SD-WAN rule that says use ADVPN1 and ADVPN2, it's only going to take the route that is available that's being advertised from the spoke. So again, way beyond the scope of what this call is, going to be able to cover. And since I got last 10 minutes, post it up on Reddit or on Discord or whatever way you can get to me. And then maybe I can set up another call a little bit later to kind of dive into that a little bit more detail. All right, with that being said, let's hop over to the fun part, the demonstration. So let me just log into these two machines. Hopefully I can get this done in the next 10 minutes. We'll see, maybe. And I hate that I get timed out. I really got to change these timeout settings. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook up these WAN bridges. So let me just make sure that they're working. Minimize, move console. And for those who haven't seen Proxmox, this is a alternative to like a VMware and all that. This is a great open source free hypervisor. I strongly recommend it. So okay, they are working just fine. So all I need to do is put these guys in line with them. So I'm gonna take my router 02, I'm gonna bridge that to 610. And I'm gonna take my router 03, bridge that to 620. Okay, so now what you're going to see is the performance SLAs. Before, I think these were down to like milliseconds, like 1 or 2 milliseconds. Now you can see they popped up to 19 and 10. So that's because, once I add them into the WAN bridge, it's going to start introducing latency. Naturally, it's because it has to go through another VM. But beyond that, because I also have it configured to start generating some traffic. So not traffic, but some network congestion. So right now, what I'm going to do is disable my Sd-Wan rule. Okay, so I'm going to set the status to disable. So we know that Sd-Wan isn't going. And what I'm going to do is start up a network stream from my branch to my hub. So on my hub side here, I got VLC running. I like this Super Mario time attack because, Super Mario, who doesn't love Super Mario? I'm going to be streaming this over HTTP port 8080. And I'm going to turn off transcoding because I want it to be as raw as it can, take up as much bandwidth as I can. And no, I just wanted to go. All right, well, it's never asked me that before. So let's try that one more time. Stream, next, HTTP, add, next, and turn off transcoding, go and go. All right. So while that is getting ready to get started there, I am going to see if I can connect to it. So I'm going to say open network stream 10. Whoops. This is 8080. Play. See if I can get to it. And my stream is not going yet. This is always the best part, right? When you're doing something live. Okay, let's try this one more time. Add this. I've literally done this thousands and thousands of times. And now this is going to be the day where it decides, hey, I'm not doing it. All right. Well, they always say the best laid plans, right? So what I'm going to do is, this is a VM. I'm going to go ahead and get this guy updated, or at least see if I can get it updated in a short amount of time. So I got 7 minutes. Hopefully within the 2-minute mark, I will be able to get this guy going. Let's try this update real quick and see what happens, and see if we can get this thing going. But all that being said, since I'm waiting for this thing to upgrade, are there any questions, any other questions about what has been seen so far? Any questions about SD-WAN in general while I'm waiting? You can feel free to take yourself off of mute if you prefer asking your question rather than going on chat. So I'll be quiet for 2 minutes and then happy to field any questions. All right. Well, I'm gonna say not everyone at once. So maybe someone's actually out there struggling to find the mute button. All right, awesome. Does preserve session route enable apply to SD-WAN dynamic routing changes? Man, that's a good question. So I am not 100% sure. I would have to actually go and test that. My 38.9% surety question answer to that is yes, it will apply to a dynamic SD-WAN session. But to be quite honest, I'm not 100% sure. So sorry, I don't have a good answer for you on that one right now. What I will say is that I can go check it out a little bit later. You're welcome to, either reach out to me through Reddit or hit me up on historiantech.com. And, I can test it out in my free time and let you know. But as far as I know, yes, that will allow you to even take a dirty route or a session that is marked as dirty, which is typically what happens when a route change happens on the FortiGate, and apply to that. So, but again, that's not a high level of confidence. Usually I like to give above 70% surety level, but in this scenario, I'm not 100% sure. So I won't pretend to know. All right, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and trust the old reboot, since this Windows server has been on for the past 100+ days, and see if I can get it going this way. So I promise y'all, if it don't work by 12:57, I will go ahead and terminate it and potentially set this up to share with y'all at a later date. But I'm not going to go a minute over 1 p.m. So, well, I might go a minute over, but I'll try to be very cognizant of your time. All right, let's try this one more time. Stream, add, Super Mario, stream, next, add. Oh, I know what the problem is. This needs to be changed to 8090. All right, sorry. So I have FortiClient EMS running on this machine, and that uses 8080 by default. So that's why I couldn't stream it, because ports in use. That being said, let's go ahead and get to the streaming. So open up network stream, change this to 8090, which is why I had that set, and play. All right, so as y'all can see, hopefully, the stream is keeping up and y'all can see Super Mario, he's doing his thing, everything's happy. So I'm not watching Super Mario right now. Imagine I'm on a voice call, a video call with some colleagues, maybe not across the pond, but at least across the state. And, we're having our web meeting. All right, so now I'm going to introduce from the FortiGate side. Before I introduce this, you can see here that my sessions are going great. If I look at my FortiView sessions, my VLC is going over VPN DC 1-1. You can see it's currently over VLC going to this host, and it's being hardware accelerated. Awesome, everything I expect to see. So now I'm going to go into my VPN 1-1, and I'm going to introduce some latency, and let's introduce some packet loss. All right, so you'll see from my video, boom. Mario's starting to struggle a little bit. It's not as fast. Wow, it actually is moving still pretty fast. All right, so let me actually go in and introduce maybe a little bit more, because that hardware acceleration is pretty resilient here. So let me go up to 400, and I'm going to do, I think, 53% packet loss. All right, see if we can get Mario to struggle a little bit. Okay, so now Mario is going to start struggling a little bit. You can see here we got a little gray sign. It's trying to download, packet loss going. You can go here and look at the SD-WAN. Even though I have the rule off, my performance is still there. So you can see that the SD-WAN is seeing, hey, something's not happy right now. But if I go and look at the session in Fortinet and on the FortiGate, sorry, I'm still taking this bad VPN 1-1, even though I got a perfectly working VPN 1-2. So what I'm going to do here is go back. I'm gonna let you see this in real time. Usually what I do is I stop it and start all over again, but ain't nobody got time for that. So I'm gonna go ahead, hit this session, turn this bad boy on, and let's see if it gets smart. So I go back and look at my display. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I should have started it over again. So what I'm gonna do is stop it on both sides. I'm going to resume the session, stop here. All right, got a minute, got to get a minute to win it. Where was I at? Here, stream, add, boom, stream, next. HTTP, add, 8090, next. All right, I'm just going to do the same test again so you can see it in action. Go back to this guy here. VLC, almost there. Stream, sorry, open network stream. There we go. Network stream is going. All right, working just fine. So I'm going to do the same test here. Custom 400, 2% packet loss. And we see it should be over on VPN 1-2, which it is. So I typically like to give a little bit more information and show that in more detail. But since I was coming up to the tail end of this, I wanted to make sure that you got to see it in action. So with all that being said, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you all so much for your time. I really much so appreciate everyone who joined. Again, feel free to hit me up on Reddit, historiantech.com, as well as Discord, Afroman Says in Reddit and Discord. And lastly, feel free to join our Fortinet and Discord so we can continue this conversation. Hope y'all have a great rest of y'all day. Thank y'all so much for your time. This recorder will be posted shortly. Talk to y'all later.